Hello and welcome. I'm Sima Katauka and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's take a look at the top headlines of this hour. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres strongly condemned the terrorist bombing that targeted a mosque in Homs, stressing the need to identify those responsible for the attacks on civilians and places of worship and bring them to justice. Thai Defense Ministry spokesperson has said that Thailand and Cambodia have agreed to a second ceasefire this year to halt weeks of deadly border clashes that have killed at least 101 people, with the truce taking effect at 5 o'clock GMT and holding hours later, as both militaries now have agreed to maintain direct communications. A Russian drone and missile barrage on Kyiv kills one person, wounds dozens and leaves hundreds of thousands without power and heating in freezing temperatures. The hours-long air alert comes ahead of President Volodymyr Zelensky's planned meeting with President Donald Trump to discuss a possible peace plan. Saudi-led forces warn that they are ready to act directly against Yemen separatists while Riyadh urges them to peacefully hand back seized territory. Saudi officials say the priority is protecting civilians after strikes in Hadramaut and escalating tensions with UAE-backed forces. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio urges restraint in diplomacy as violence in Yemen escalates. He says Washington supports efforts towards a lasting solution while avoiding taking sides between Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Israel becomes the first country to formally recognize Somaliland as an independent state, with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promising cooperation in key sectors. Somalia opposes secession, while President Donald Trump says he does not support U.S. recognition of Somaliland. French police arrest a man suspected of stabbing 3 women in the Paris metro during year-end festivities. Prosecutors say he is tracked through surveillance footage and his mobile phone before being detained north of Paris. Argentina's Congress approves the 2026 budget, the first under President Javier Milei, including about $102 billion in spending and projecting 5% growth with 10.1% inflation. The plan forecasts a primary surplus of 1.2% of GDP, marking a return to formal budget approval after 2 years of rollovers. Now for this hour, we start with US and Nigeria. Following surprise US strikes targeting terrorists in Nigeria, it remains unclear who or what was actually hit, as Washington and Abuja tell slightly different stories. The two countries agreed that the strikes hit targets linked to Islamic State, but neither one has provided details on which of Nigeria's myriad armed groups were targeted. There are reports that the strikes were delayed by American President Donald Trump to prioritize the symbolism of launching the attack on Christmas, and allegations that Washington backed out of issuing a joint statement with the Nigerians. Former presidential candidate Omoyele Sowore has said that 24 hours after the bombing, neither of the countries provided clear, verifiable information about what was actually struck. The munitions used were also reportedly unclear. The U.S. military released a video showing a Navy ship launching what appeared to be missiles. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Keith Vaz. He's a former British minister, joins us live from London. Thank you very much, Mr. Vaz, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, why suddenly, this escalating situation has occurred between US and Nigeria, and why has US suddenly decided to use strikes against inside of Nigeria?
It is an unusual circumstance where America has joined with the armed forces of Africa's biggest country in order to launch an attack on the sovereign territory of Nigeria. So it's absolutely clear that this must have been done with the support, encouragement, and the tactical advantage given by the Nigerian authorities. So this is not what's happening in Venezuela, for example, where America is doing this on its own. This is with the support of the democratically elected government of Nigeria. But there is concern as to when this agreement was made and why it was made. There has been in the US Congress and in the American administration a lot of concern being expressed through resolutions which directly concern the situation of, in particular, Christian communities who are under attack by Islamic groups. That's the justification given by the Americans. It is not what the Nigerian government is saying. It has not actually brought religion into it. As far as the Nigerian government is concerned, it's very much about the internal security of Nigeria. So there's already an issue as to why this is happening and why it's happening now, because these militants have been in Nigeria for a number of years, and it may be there are different ways of tackling this problem. But clearly, this is with Nigeria's agreement, and this has obviously excited concern in the opposition and amongst other groups as to why this has happened on Nigerian sovereign territory. If you're going to deal with an internal problem, then you should deal with it yourself without asking for another country to come in. Because as you know, at the moment there is an economic problem between Nigeria and the United States over tariffs. There's also an issue to do with visas. Many visas have been revoked by Donald Trump. So it is odd that they called on the Americans to work with them in order to try and resolve this issue.
Right. Thank you for highlighting all that. And there are so many discrepancies between what Nigeria claims and what U.S. claims, including the Christian attacks on Christians, minority one. So what else can be the U.S.'s motivation in attacking Nigeria?
Well, we don't know. I think that there is that call for transparency, and I think it's important that it should be assessed. But if there is a divergence between why the Americans think they should be doing this and why the democratically elected government of Nigeria think it should be done, these are issues that need to be explored. And bombing groups on the continent of Africa when the United States of America is very unusual. This is not a normal daily occurrence, and I think most of the countries will now be fearful that this might happen again. So let us be clear, this is unprecedented, where a democratically elected government in Africa has asked the Americans to come in and bomb part of their sovereign territory. It creates a precedent which people will need to be very wary of.
So what do you think, how can Nigeria, or how should Nigeria protect its sovereignty and consent be managed in such, in this case of joint or unilateral counter-terrorism operations with U.S.?
Nigeria is a very, very rich country. It's the richest country in Africa. It has the resources to buy its own weapons and deal with these strategic issues itself. There are massive American involvements, massive, absolutely massive. That means that there is a big issue of concern to the way in which people can move forward. So let us find out why this has happened, first of all. What the, if you like, paper trail is, but it probably is the AI trail in this case. Why did it lead to this situation? Why has Nigeria not dealt with this itself? Nigeria has faced these internal problems for years and years and years. Something has changed where they've asked the Americans to intervene. What has changed and how can it be addressed? Because of course the country that is closest to Nigeria in terms of the West is the United Kingdom, because Nigeria is a former colony. And I'm surprised that the British are not involved in this. I don't know whether they were asked, whether they declined, but this is unusual.
Yes, it is very unusual and also interesting that the fact that, UK is not involved. Do you think any other country will come to maybe intervene between them, or does Nigeria and US have any common ground to, diplomatically talk this out?
Well, I'm surprised they've become best friends, because most of the rhetoric that's come out of the Trump White House in the last 12 months has been to punish Nigeria, to put up tariffs and to revoke visas and to tell Nigerian students not to come to the United States. So this is a change, but maybe because of the militancy, it needs to happen. And I hope that it happens as fast as possible.
Yes, I hope so too. Thank you very much, Mr. Keith Vaz, for joining us today and sharing that insight throughout this news. Thank you. Now we move on to Middle East. Israeli military vehicles were seen operating in the West Bank town of Qabatiyya as Israeli forces launched a security raid following a deadly attack in northern Israel. The operation comes a day after a Palestinian assailant rammed a man with a vehicle and stabbed a woman in northern Israel on Friday. Both victims later passed away, according to Israeli emergency services. Israeli police said the attacker, who was from the occupied West Bank, was shot and wounded by a civilian at the scene before being taken to hospital. During the raid in Qabatiyya, Israeli forces imposed a curfew, shutting down secondary roads and detained several residents for questioning. One detainee said those taken were asked whether they knew the reason behind the military operations. Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said he had ordered a forceful response in Qabatiyya, identifying it as the hometown of the assailant, and said the operation was aimed at preventing further attacks.
أخذني كلب شدي لورا وحطني بالجيب من ورا، بس ركبني كلب الجيب كان يحط الكلبشات على وجهي، المرابط على وجهي، وبعدها أخذنا على لحد بيت العملية، خذونا جوا وصار يحقق معنا شو رايكم بالوضع العملي وش رايكم بالوضع العملية، ما حدا يحكي لأنه اللي بدي يحكي بده ياكل كتلي، وبعده صار يسأل فينا بتعرفوا انتوا ليش جايين هون؟ قلنا له لا، قال لا بتعرفوا انتوا ليش جايين مشان العملية هون. قلنا له لا مش عاملين احنا ولا شيء نرى.
الفرق بين الاجتياح هذا والسابق انه هذا مشدد اكثر، ومنع تجول البلد وسكرت كل الطرق وتسكرت كل طرق البلد الفرعية والرئيسية. شايف، بالاضافة لهذا الحكي يعني المنخفضات الجوية القادمة أدت لضغوطات أكبر على الناس. يعني الحاجز أنا هين باب بيتي، يعني بدي أطلع أخوي مريض على المستشفى، ما عرفتش أطلع، تفاجأت لقيت الحاجز هنا.
Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Martin Tsai Reitz. He's an international affairs expert, joins us live from Ecuador. Thank you very much, Mr. Reitz, for joining us again. Now looking at this, what more can you tell us about this ongoing situation, continuing situation in towards Palestinians living under the occupied force of Israel, and as an occupying force, what is Israel's responsibility while conducting these kind of raids in civilian areas, which impacts these people's lives?
Yeah, the big problem in this situation is that in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and in general in the Middle East conflict, separating innocent civilians with terror cells is very difficult. It's very sad when innocent civilians get harmed by any intervention by the Israeli military. But in the last weeks, Israel has been targeted of a lot of terror attacks from terror cells from the West Bank, and it has been widely reported that the Israeli response is always the demolition of the terrorist house. The problem here is how we can prove that the family was involved in the terror attack or not. This is a very difficult situation, and I think the only solution is trying to stop this terror to be carried out by enforcing security in the border between the West Bank and Israel.
And how does this expanding settlement in the West Bank affects the security dynamics and a Palestinian resistance there?
Yeah, this is also a very difficult situation because under international law, these settlements are illegal. However, after the Oslo Agreement, it is completely legal that Israel has a military presence in the areas that were put for Israeli control. However, according to international law, only the military should be there and not civilian people, something that has been not taken in consideration by the Israeli government. However, the problem here is not only the settlements. The problem here is also the radicalization of the Palestinians in the West Bank. We have infiltration of Hamas and other terror groups like Islamic Jihad, which they're not going to give up on their terror activity, even if Israel stops the construction of Israeli settlements in the West Bank. This ideology will never end. I think the radicalization is a problem, and I think one thing is the right of the Palestinian Authority to engage in diplomacy or asking for help for the UN, and another completely different topic is terror, which is never which will never be accepted.
Thank you very much. With that, I would like to thank Mr. Martin Sairites for joining us today from Ecuador and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. The European Union has welcomed a newly signed ceasefire agreement between Thailand and Cambodia, urging both nations to implement it in good faith. EU Foreign Affairs spokesperson Anor El Anouni has praised the role of association of Southeast Asian nations in mediating the deal and called for genuine commitment to the truce. The 2025 escalation is rooted in a long-standing territorial dispute over the colonial-era demarcation of the 800 kilometers border near the ancient temple ruins, including the UNESCO-listed Preet Vihar Temple. Previous ceasefire attempts in July and October 2025 have failed due to mutual accusations of violations. Now for this discussion, we welcome Mr. Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee. He's a former Indian ambassador, joins us live from New Delhi. Thank you very much, Ms. Baswati, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this, can historical border disputes, rooted in colonial era decisions, do you think this can be resolved through modern diplomacy alone in case of Thailand and Cambodia at this time?
Thank you very much, Asuma. This has been a tricky topic. I can recall I was India's ambassador to UNESCO and in the World Heritage Site when we decided to give the Priya Vihar temple. It's a temple actually built by Indians centuries ago. Priya Vihar means the temple of love, and it's on the border of Cambodia and Thailand. It has two entries, one from the Thai side, one from the Cambodian side. And the entry from the Thai side is the disputed entry. Nevertheless, UNESCO went ahead and gave the Priya Vihar temple the World Heritage status. But it has always been a tenuous piece because there's also the whole issue of from which gate the tourists should enter, from the Thai side or the Cambodian side. Now, with the outbreak of hostilities which had calmed down, we were distressed to find that the Thais have also destroyed a beautiful statue of a Hindu god, which had been constructed some years ago. But Thais have clarified that this was because of security. It is imperative that the UNESCO's World Heritage Committee, which in the first place gave this status to this site, take up this measure because according to the laws of the governing World Heritage Sites, any such dispute has to be resolved by the committee itself. So I think rather than outsiders like President Trump trying to get involved in it, or the EU, it should be there should be an appeal made to UNESCO and to its World Heritage Committee, which would then send a monitoring team and which would suggest a solution. They had in fact done that twice before, and the solutions had worked. Each time some arrangement had been made between the Thais and the Cambodians, which were mutually acceptable, and it worked. This time it seems that both sides have become much more aggressive, and that is why the peace is being repeatedly violated. But in my perspective, as somebody who's an insider and who was there when the World Heritage status was conferred on the site, I think it is important to get UNESCO involved, because if they tell both parties that they will withdraw the World Heritage status conferred on the site, then it would be a great blow to tourism for both countries. And I think that is really the solution, to tell them that either you both make peace and allow tourists to come and see it, because it belongs to humanity, it belongs to both countries, and it belongs to humanity. And people should have the right to go and see it. I have seen this temple. It is an extremely beautiful temple, and it actually shows the Indian heritage and civilization outflung into these parts of the world, because you can see the great influence. Even the name of the temple is a Sanskrit name, Priya Vihar. So I think it's very important for us to ensure that there is peace and that nothing happens to the sanctity of the temple, which should be preserved for human heritage. So,
Yes, indeed. Thank you for emphasizing that. And it is so important that these heritage sites are also kept in mind when, these things occur. Although, the outsiders have some limits in enforcing the ceasefire, what role do you think is ASEAN should play in these regional disputes in this case?
Yes, well, the European Union actually is fully aware of the facts of the case and how it can be resolved. The European Union actually had been earlier accused of being more pro-Cambodian than Thai, because the Cambodians always were militarily weaker than the Thais, and many felt that they were being bullied. However, that was long sorted out when the whole issue of how to enter the temple and how to exit was sorted out. I am surprised that the EU has not itself suggested what I am suggesting, because the EU, when I was there, played a very active role in helping many of us, including India, to get the World Heritage status for this temple, which it richly deserves. Even if you Google it and have a look at it, it is a beautiful piece of international art and heritage, which needs to be preserved. So I think that perhaps the EU will be able to prevail. For that matter, India too can prevail over both parties. We are upset by the destruction of this statue, but then the Thais have explained to us that it was because of security that they did so, and they did not mean to cause any offense to any country by doing what they did. But it seems to me that both sides, but particularly the Thais, have become a little more aggressive. So it would be important for those who are in the know, like the European Union, like India. Also, I recall that Australia was very active at that time. Large and emerging countries should get involved in organizing some kind of an arrangement on this matter. So,
thank you for sharing very timely and important message with us on NewsX World. With that, I would like to thank Ms. Ambassador Baswati Mukherjee for joining us and sharing that insight. Now we move on to our next news. Amid risks from Russia, the Switzerland's top military official has warned that the country is unprepared to defend itself against a full-scale attack, highlighting significant gaps in its defense capabilities. Army Chief Thomas Sueseli, who will step down at the end of this year, has stressed that while Switzerland is prepared for cyber attacks and threats, its military still faces equipment shortages. Meanwhile, to address rising risks from Russia, the Swiss government has committed to increase the defense spending, modernizing artillery, and replacing outdated fighter jets with F-35s. However, concerns over cost overruns and limited federal finances has sparked criticism. Despite the war in Ukraine, Sueseli has stated that Swiss attitude towards defense have not shifted, partly due to a false belief that neutrality offers protection. The country plans to raise its defense spending to 1% of its GDP by 2032. Now we move on to China. China's cyber regulator has issued draft rules for public comment that would tighten oversight of artificial intelligence services, designed to simulate human personalities and engage users in emotional interaction. The move underscores Beijing's effort to shape the rapid rollout of consumer-facing AI by strengthening safety and ethical requirements. The proposed rules would apply to AI products and services offered to the public in China that present simulated human personality traits. The draft proposes rules requiring providers to warn against excessive use, intervene when users show signs of addiction, assume safety responsibilities across the product lifecycle, and establish systems for algorithm review, data security, and personal information protection. The draft also targets potential psychological risks, which means if users are found to exhibit extreme emotions or addictive behavior, providers will have to take necessary measures to intervene. That's all we have time for. Keep watching NewsX World for more news updates from around the world.